Hello, everyone. Welcome back to LA Not So Confidential. This is Dr. Shiloh.
Hey, it's Dr. Scott.
Hi. We are in October. We're super stoked about one of our favorite months of the year. So getting into the Halloween spirit with a lot, as well as just kind of have a lot of events coming up. So it feels like a whirlwind for us.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the next month. And it's kind of cool, as a lot of you have seen if you're following our social media. We just hit our 2-year birthday, really, of starting this, which is kind of mind-blowing because it seems like it literally seems like yesterday we were walking down First and Spring, and you turned to me and said, I think we should do a podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like yesterday.
It does, and I totally liken it to having a child. We have literally kept this thing alive for 2 years, so I'm very proud of us as parents.
Yeah, and it's funny. Most people would say it's funny to listen to other podcasts, especially ones that I love, and they'll say, "Don't listen to our first episodes. Don't go back and listen to our first episodes because they're awful." And I would say I agree partially with that, in that we've come a long way. We've kind of found our legs in a way that I really never expected to. But if you're out there and you're thinking about doing a podcast, I want you to listen to our first episode so you can see just how far we've come.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Just figuring things out, and everybody has to start from someplace. I mean, you were really helpful for me because I'm such a weird perfectionist. You wouldn't be able to tell by looking at my office because it looks like someone had a full-on Grand Mal in there. But you keep me on track, and I kept thinking, okay, got to make this perfect. And you were sort of, no, we just got to get it done.
Right. Well, and I think that's something that I would also, if I could redo, it would be, I felt like we had all of these ideas in our brains. We just wanted to get them out super fast. And maybe we could have taken a little bit more time to learn the equipment or learn, those sort of things. Yeah. But when you're ready to go, you just want to get your stuff out there to see how people will start responding to it. So it's been a really, really fun journey these 2 years. So
hey, thanks for that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yay.
All right. So lots in store for you for October. Our topic today is intimate partner homicide. Heavy topic.
Yeah.
So this came across my radar when I was at, again, some training recently, and just wanted to dive a little bit more into it because it was really nice for it to be parsed out as a separate topic, because I feel like I hear about it all the time. So much of the true crime that we consume is about intimate partner homicide. It's just too common, and I think we need to give some attention to that. So we wanted to cover the topic, to touch on it. By no means are either of us experts in the areas of domestic violence and the intricacies of studying and researching intimate partner homicide as our full-on forte.
It's its own specific area of study that deserves its own specific area of study, just due to its prevalence. And one of my professors at Antioch, the graduate program I was in, Dr. Michelle Harway, is an expert in the area of intimate partner violence and domestic violence, which we'll get into why we're actually changing the terms now to be more inclusive, which is very important.
Right.
But I remember being in a class where she was sort of covering part of it. It was a class that covered more than just that, but sort of looking at violence. And we used the book that she had published as a textbook. And, sometimes you think when a professor gives you their own book, you're like, oh, please.
Right. But take my money.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, this was amazing. And it's the title is particularly provocative. It's called Next Time She'll Be Dead.
Wow.
And it was an eye opener for me. I was just completely unaware of the depth and spectrum of, the cycle of violence, coercive control, all the things we're going to kind of touch on today.
Right. And of course we wanted to pair a story with this, and there's been so many lately, and we didn't want to do something that's been overdone already or talk about, Dirty John again. So I stumbled across this story about Connie Navarro, kind of in an unusual way. So I like and am into a lot of street art, local street artists here in Los Angeles, and started seeing some that was done by Jane's Addiction's guitarist Dave Navarro. He's a street artist. He lives in Los Angeles, and he takes his art all over. But it was what really jumped out to me, being the true crime junkie that I am, is that a lot of his content was having to do with kids that were victim of trauma or crime. And he does a lot of stencil work, kind of, if you guys are probably familiar with like Banksy and that sort of work, on stencil work on sidewalks and on buildings and walls and such. And he does some other things as well, just some really cool mediums that he uses. But really the stuff that you were seeing on the street, and some of the content was JonBenet Ramsey, and it was JFK's kids, kind of iconic photos then turned into a stencil. And I thought that's such a dark sort of angle to take with your art. And then when I started following on social media, I saw that a lot of this series is what he was calling trauma kids, hashtag trauma kids was on this. And so I looked into it a little further and realized that Dave is a child survivor of a parental homicide. And this is a way in which he is healing and working through his own trauma and identifying with some of these other children that have been victims in various ways. So I thought that was really interesting. And so we're going to talk later in the episode about the death of his mother, Connie Navarro. But first, let's start with talking about intimate partner homicide. Just to define that, so that would be the killing of a spouse, ex-spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, someone that has been in a relationship with the perpetrator, whether it's current or they've already broken up. Of the women murdered in the United States, 55% of them, over half, it's by an intimate partner. So we're talking about
the vast staggering
majority.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean, we know, I think we know this, but to hear the numbers, I didn't really know exactly where the numbers were. But when we're just looking at violence, men are still predominantly the highest rates of victims because they're killing each other. But when we look at, of the women who are murdered, 55% of them, over half, it's from somebody that they were in a relationship with. It's just astounding. But again, I think we pull back and we go, well, yeah, of course, we know people are murdered by people close to them usually. I thought it was really interesting that when you look at Hispanic women, they're most likely to be killed in connection to partner violence, above and beyond even the 55%. It's about 61%. So,
and I think we talk about that in terms of, or we have to, we reflect on that in terms of cultural influence. When you provide counseling to Latina women, the idea of them, one of the things that's brought up, excuse me, in my experience in counseling this population, what I've noticed is that they're up against sort of pushing back or trying to have an identity in the presence of, a long history of machismo, acculturation, where that there isn't really the same level of respect for gender equality. It just isn't there yet.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's going to add fuel to the fire for these type of violent interactions. Sure.
Some other, just looking at race, some other stats that I came across were looking at women as victims of homicide, not necessarily intimate partner, but that Black women and Indigenous women were above and beyond victims more often than other ethnic races. And again, that wasn't related to particularly someone they've been in a relationship with. But we know violence against women is a terrible ongoing issue that is perpetrated, and still the flames continue to be fanned in lots of different ways.
Well, there's also more information. I mean, I was completely ignorant of the homicide rate of Indigenous women in North America,
right?
Going over into Canada. And it kind of hooks back to other subjects that we've talked about, like long haul trucker serial killers. There's a highway of death in Canada where all of these Indigenous women have disappeared. And, it's on one hand, it's horrific. And on the other hand, it's high time that we start paying attention to it for those of us that are in the field, like myself, to only recently become aware of it. I mean, that's pretty bad.
Right. What always fascinated me for decades has just been one of those cases that stick out for me is all the women murdered in Juarez, Mexico.
Right.
And so, when you talk about North America, it is definitely a problem over the entire continent. So, however, in the past 25 years, the rates at which women are dying by intimate partners has significantly declined. And we see that across all race and gender groups. So depending on who they're in a relationship with, as far as the gender of the perpetrator as well. And I mean, it's likely due to the criminal justice policies and laws that have been in place. Now we know what domestic violence is, and we're recognizing it for what it is. The laws and the policies that are put there to keep the offender away from the victim as much as possible. We know that some of them are just pieces of paper. If we're talking about restraining orders. Oh,
absolutely.
But there are
a necessary part of the process as well until our judicial system can catch up with what needs to be done in this situation. It may be just a piece of paper in whatever area of the U.S. or around the world you live, but it's the first step. And, if you find yourself in that situation, get the restraining order.
Sure.
Get it.
Sure. But it could be something like the laws in which the victim doesn't necessarily have to prosecute. The state can take on the role of, we're prosecuting this because of so many women that would recant or not want to follow through with prosecution, so sort of taking that out of their hands. So lots of changes just in the last 25 years that have probably done some real good work out there, as well as, I just thinking off the top of my head, involving domestic violence advocates or social workers to some of these women in their cases. And we've seen how that doesn't always work, and that can all be in place. And then you have a situation like Nicole Brown Simpson, who had all of that support around her, and still, there was definitely a lot left to be desired still with the criminal justice system and helping her out. But overall, I think it's pretty neat to see that the laws are working the way they have with 25 years under our belt to sort of look at this time. And so especially with like the Behavioral Analysis Unit in the FBI, they look at intimate partner violence leading up to homicide as being physical, sexual, psychological, like we talk about, but they also put a lot of attention on the component of stalking and those types of behaviors, because they know that is so embedded with a lot of the offenders that end up killing their partners or former partners. The behavior, especially when they're doing their investigations and these psychological autopsies of what was happening with the victim prior to the offense, all of this stalking behavior is coming to light. Which, make sure you go back and listen to our stalking episode. Yeah. We'll give you plenty on stalking because we're not going to cover it so much here. Maybe in our case study, yes, but not the ins and outs like we did before. So, risk factors. So let's talk about risk factors a little bit when we're looking at men who end up killing the women that they're in relationships with. Past violence, obviously, like we always say, best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So if they've been violent in the past, particularly when we talk about violence, if there's been recent attacks and recent violence, and if it's been very frequent, then that is showing a ramp up to maybe an event that could be fatal.
So does that mean that they're getting more comfortable with it? Or is it something else? Is that something else is escalating their...
I think all of the above.
Okay.
When we're looking at the research on risk factors, and risk factors just are what they are. Sometimes we can ask these like why or if backstories to risk factors, and we don't necessarily have that, or it doesn't matter. It's just because that risk factor is present.
Good point. Excellent point. It just doesn't even matter. Let's just look at the factor.
But I think as just curious human beings, we want to know like what is that about? Right. Why is that? And I find myself doing that all the time. I want to break here and talk about a specific type of violence, which is so interesting to look at if there is strangulation present in these previous bouts of violence and attacks, how that leads to fatal incidents of violence with these women. So strangulation, and it's strangulation. It's not choking. I'm sorry. This is like my total pet peeve. You choke on a piece of food, you strangle someone. Okay. So in the language and reports, I actually read a document put out by the U.S. Department of Justice that used the term choking, and I wanted to choke whoever wrote. Yeah. I wanted to strangle them.
You wanted to shove some food down their
I wanted to
force them to choke.
Choke on this.
Make you choke.
So it's strangulation. So the San Diego City Attorney's Office, they did a study, and they looked at about 300 near fatal cases of strangulation. They found the nuts and bolts of their findings was that for each strangulation that happens, that woman is 750% more likely to be killed than a woman where her partner has never strangled her, where he's just done other types of violent acts towards her. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, and it also, it speaks to me of another important point, is that strangulation takes a long time.
It does.
It's not an instantaneous. It's not like stabbing someone, shooting someone, or even, bludgeoning someone that then incapacitates them. Like,
where in a fit of rage, you're like, oh shit, what did I just do?
Right. No, you're maintaining it. Like, isn't it like 3 to 7 minutes?
Something like that.
It's like 3 to 7 minutes as and that's where I think that's really reflective of the narcissism and the sociopathy in the perpetrator.
Yeah. Yeah. There are organizations that are dedicated to domestic violence research and awareness and prevention that are just focusing on strangulation because it is such a big deal. So getting the information out to women if they have been strangled and what that means for them, as well as the awareness for the rest of us to sort of recognize signs in maybe friends or family where that's been going on, we're literal, damage to different parts of their body that might not be super obvious, like the pectoral hemorrhaging or something like that. But it's a really huge, significant risk factor for fatal cases. I also think, not only does it take a long time, but it's something that can sort of teeter on, is it going to be fatal or is it not? If it can be another way to control or sort of take someone to the edge of death.
Well, to terrorize them, right?
And terrorize.
So
yeah, so I have your life literally in my hands. It's sort of akin to holding a gun and pointing it at someone, because all you got to do is pull the trigger. And with strangulation, all you have to do is, push hard enough or hold hard enough. But it's a very serious thing if that's going on in a relationship. Other risk factors are things like drug use, serious alcohol abuse. Those are both highly, highly correlated with individuals who end up going on to kill their partners, and gun possession. So we do have laws in a lot of states that if you've been convicted of a domestic violence offense, you can no longer legally own a firearm. So I'm sure that's a piece that has also been within policies in the last 25 years that have helped contribute to the decline. But I think a lot of research, there also are not too much research or interventions that look at drug abuse and alcohol abuse when it comes to these types of situations. I have a really great chart here that I wanted to bring up to just kind of talk about the difference between women who are abused and then those that end up getting murdered. And for all of these that I'm going to list, these risk factors for the women who end up being murdered, they experience these behaviors from their partner at least twice the rate of women who were not murdered. So
what you're going to show us then, or what you're going to talk about, is factors that pretty much indicate a high probability of resulting in death.
Right.
Okay.
Right. All right. So we have partner used or threatened with a weapon at some point. It could be any weapon. And then just having a gun in the house was a high risk factor as well. We already talked about partners trying to strangle the woman. Partner violently and consistently jealous. So we're looking at attitudes and maybe some personality weaved in there. We always hear with these types of cases, if I can't have her, no one can type of situation, which is also going to be echoed in the case study that we talk about. Physical violence increases in severity. The partner controls most or all of the women's daily activities. So from who she's speaking to where she's going, all of the above. The male partner, illicit drugs, and when it comes to alcohol, really focusing on the alcohol abuse as if they are drunk every day or almost every day. So if they're getting to the point of pretty decent intoxication, that's when we start to see like inhibitions go down. They're more impulsive. Excuse me. And if that's happening, think about it on a daily basis. As I'm going through these, I just want to sort of paint a picture of, think about being a woman living in a home with a man like this, like what eggshells are you walking on all the time, just to make sure there's not some explosive violence that's going to be anchored towards you. Women who are beaten while pregnant.
Oof.
That's a big one in terms of them ending up being murdered. The woman's perception of her partner being capable of killing her. So when they go back and they look at statements or with people that have been able to be interviewed, or maybe something they've confided to in a friend. In a lot of these cases, Susan Powell, right. And they're writing full-on letters. If anything should ever happen to me, look at my husband. Here's my stuff. Like getting all their ducks in a row and documenting. I think Nicole Brown Simpson did the same thing.
And it's just it's mind blowing. I mean, I'm sitting here with my hands over my face. Like, it really is mind blowing. And maybe I'm speaking from a place of male privilege, of the idea that anyone would be in that position, even though we've heard story after story of this, that someone, I'm probably going to get killed. Mm-hmm. So I just need to put everything in place rather than do anything and everything. Right. And once again, I know that I'm speaking from a place of privilege.
But you're saying it's hard to wrap your mind around.
Yeah. And I think even a woman, a lot of women would go, what the hell? Why?
We do it all the time,
right.
All the time. And it's just one of those things that I'm going to let the victim speak to me and tell me how it is for them. And I'm going to believe that rather than taking my view of like, oh, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
Sort of stance. But it's hard to imagine. Definitely.
And I think that's one of the reasons we also know that when we talk about victims of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, there is no solid profile for a person. So we can't, and we cannot, and neither, nor should we blame the victim in,
right.
well, if he or she was just had stronger character, or if he or she
pick better partners,
right. Or
you
know how to take care of yourself, or like, why aren't you thinking of the kids? It's not about that. It's about the narcissism and sociopathy on the other side of the person that just slowly continues to narrow the victim's life.
Right. So there's two factors about suicide that I found really interesting. So really the only factor on this that does not correlate with the woman being more likely to be murdered is if she feels suicidal or actually attempts suicide herself. That basically has nothing to do with it. But if her partner is exhibiting suicidality, then that does show that if that's happening, then women are more likely to be murdered. So,
okay, now that's really interesting to me, because that is in line with the Vitra model of the fluidity between suicidality and homicidality.
Right.
So if this perpetrator already has these homicidal violent ideations toward his partner plus his own suicidal ideation and is swinging wildly between those two, we have no idea, knowing what the Jenga block is that could be pulled out. It could be anything. It could be innocuous. It could be a dog that gets in the way. It could be a dish that's dropped.
Yep. And hence, murder, suicide type situations. But yeah, when a lot of our research in the field of psychology, when we talk about violence is just a big umbrella where violence towards others and violence towards yourself is in there as well. So when you see a history of that in the past of somebody, they could also, you see that as a potential for violence, whether it's against yourself or someone else. So I think that's a good baseline. Scott's going to talk about coercive control a bit, and then we're going to jump into our case study.
So, right, and we've talked about this before. I always circle back around to give enormous credit to Laura Richards of Paladin. Laura Richards, who most of you, I'm sure if you're in this genre, you're aware of who she is. She's a criminal behavior analyst in the UK, and she's the director of Paladin, which is an organization that seeks to continue to reform violence law campaigns and to criminalize this concept that we're talking about, which is coercive control, which I think that's a big task, because so many aspects of coercive control and Lenore Walker's cycle of violence are somewhat ephemeral, because they're about behavior, and how do you criminalize behavior that is still in its nascent stages, where an individual is assumed to be able to have insight into how much choice they have. So I think that's a big challenge she's up against. If you're at all interested in educating yourself on this, just Google Laura Richards and Paladin coercive control. Tons of her articles come up. She's a wonderful speaker, and she's a regular contributor to another podcast by the casting director of Criminal Minds.
Right, Real Crime Profile.
Real Crime Profile.
Right.
Because I'm the worst at remembering names.
I think we talked about her a lot.
We talked about her several times, and I think she's great. And I think she also has so many great articles that are really written for laymen too. And one of the ones that I love is, it just basically says, "Are you in an abusive relationship?" And it's like sort of the anti-cosmopolitan.
Here, take this quiz to see if.
But it's necessary. If you're having doubts, it's necessary. But even Laura, who has moved this forward, I love calling her Laura.
I know.
We're just like buds, right?
It's because my mom's name
Ms.
is
Richards.
Laura.
Yes,
so
exactly.
You feel comfortable with that.
But she, she didn't come up with she's taking this concept and she's moving it forward. And the concept itself, the term, was developed by Evan Stark. And what Evan Stark did, who's an academic in this area, is he wanted to make, like, you were really in parallel what you were talking about, the difference between choking and strangling. He wanted to really narrow in on the definition of the term, so people have to understand that domestic violence is more than just a fight. Domestic violence is not one particular incident, just as bullying is not one isolated incident. When he wanted to give something that really but really delineates and expands on that particular concept. So what he's trying to do is explain that it's a pattern of behavior that really the goal of which is to take away the victim. God, I hate the word victim. I'm having such a reaction to it. I don't know why.
Well,
but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But it's about trying to take away an individual's freedom, their liberty, and what's really scary is to really attempt to take away their sense of self, to deconstruct their identity into this submissive position. So without going in, you've already covered a lot about the perpetrator, but just like sitting with that for a second to think about that is what an individual's goal is. My goal as a perpetrator of this abuse is to take someone and further objectify them and turn them into this non-entity that I then control in every way.
It sounds like so much work. I mean, it's
that's a really good point.
It's just
it
like
is
you
a
said,
lot of work
to have the mindset of this is what my goal is, and then you got to be on top of it. You are shaping this person's behavior with every little thing and being very strategic about it.
Well, I think
building up,
and we've talked about grooming techniques in sexual offenders, and I think that it does take a lot of time. And also, it's so second nature to some of these characterologically disturbed individuals that this is just what they do. This is just the way they walk through life.
True.
But, when it gets into the stalking, which we'll talk about in the Dave Navarro example, that was a lot of work. That was a lot of phone calls. It was a lot of, surveillance, right?
Yeah.
Did the guy work?
Right.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I think that's some of the language we used in the stalking episode was surveillance.
But, getting back to this, is the goal was to, instead of using the term domestic violence, they want the phrase domestic abuse so that they can really expand on the definition that it's not about fights, it's about an ongoing situation, and it contains and is made up of much more than just violence, more than just physical violence. It is a matter of, it's brainwashing in many ways. It is narrowing an individual's experiential life, removing family members from the equation, removing so that you're just one by one, you're narrowing an individual's life so that they have nothing but you, which is now and now I'm sort of telling on myself. And what I said earlier is at the end of that, you've convinced a person that they have nothing and you've isolated from their friends, their families. Mm-hmm. So how can you leave that if your sole support is this person who's been making every decision for you?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So.
And I like that it's gone towards intimate partner violence or abuse, away from us using domestic violence so much, because domestic is when I was working as a police officer, that could be between siblings or parents and children, like adult children, to where anyone who lived in the household, it could be a domestic issue. So if you're cohabitating with that person, that's sort of how the law was written. And now this is just even more narrowly defined and looking specifically.
Yeah, and I would say
because they're two different things.
They're two different
things.
Not
that there's not underlying issues going on with those other situations, but it's different from what you're describing.
Yeah, and it also feels like that the word domestic has just been so processed down that it doesn't hold any weight anymore. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, but I'm glad that this work is being done. It's this particular model, which is so similar to the Lenore Walker cycle of violence, really uses specific techniques, like I was talking about before, isolation from social circles, social support networks, family, degradation, whether obvious or whether subtle, whether it is what's the term they use in the pickup art, the negging, sort of you elevate one part of the individual's physical attributes. Oh, you're so beautiful. God, it's just, if your teeth were straight, you'd be a knockout, that kind of thing. And it can start with that, but then go on to more insidious forms of degradation, or more explicit as well as implicit. And then mind games. We talked about gaslighting. Gaslighting is a ridiculous phenomenon that is used by these individuals. But probably the one that puts all of these things, that makes all of these things be able to be integrated into this technique, is micro-regulation. And micro-regulation, to me, the more I read about this and preparing for this, it explains itself. It's basically every single detail of the victim's life is regulated. And it made me think of the movie Sleeping with the Enemy.
Right.
Remember when he comes home and they show Julia Roberts desperately in the kitchen trying to get all of the cans lined up after
the labels facing a certain way.
All the labels have to be faced a certain way. Right. And then he comes in very late. Was it Patrick Bergen? I think it's the actor that played him. But he opens the cabinet and he sees one that is just like a micro hair off. And it doesn't end up in violence then, but you can tell by the shift in him and the fear in Julia Roberts' character's eyes that, like, oh shit,
right?
I've fucked up really bad because I haven't been able to keep this up, and that's pretty terrifying.
Well, can you imagine how much it took to get her to that place to where he's shaping that behavior and inducing that fear?
And now you live on eggshells,
right?
You just live on eggshells. You're nothing but but anxiety. So what is it? Another quote that I really loved that from neurotypical.com that wrote on Laura Richards' work is that the perpetrator creates a world in which the victim is constantly monitored and criticized. Every move is checked against an unpredictable, ever-changing, unknowable rule book. So that's the part, is like the goalposts keep getting shifted all the time.
Yeah. Right.
So, and by this time you've already deconstructed the ego of the victim so that the victim doesn't have any facility or any agency with which to push back against this. So it's constant living in fear. And, one of the things that I think makes it coercive control that leads to other behaviors like stalking, even after the relationship is quote unquote ended, and then it moves into a stalking phase. One of the things that is different about the world that we live in here in the 21st century is that technology now allows you to engage in these behaviors, whether they're coercive control behaviors. I mean, we've got examples now that are being adjudicated all across the country of people monitoring their partners from work. Like they've got Nest cameras set up all over the house and they're monitoring everything. It's a level that we would not have had to dealt with a decade ago.
No, you would have had to do your own surveillance, sitting outside their apartment waiting. So monitoring them in the moment, and then the cyber stalking maybe afterwards or during as well. But there's just so many ways to infiltrate someone's life and privacy.
For everybody here who's listened to Dirty John, which I think is beautifully produced, Laura goes into it in depth in an episode of Real Crime Profile that I highly recommend, because one of the things that she hits on that's so important that we've talked about in different episodes, but the initial, I think we talked about this mainly in the cult episode, was the initial stages is love bombing, right? Just love bombing. And like, that's something that I would, for anyone that is ever going to be potentially in one of these situations, go back to common sense of when if it's too good, it's probably
right, too good to be true.
If it's too good to be true, then it's probably not true. And love bombing is something that gives that away.
Yes.
It may feel good, but it shouldn't feel good. It should not feel real.
Well, it shouldn't feel that good all the time in large amounts.
Right. Because it's not going to be sustained. There's no way it can be sustained.
No. Okay. So So let's look at the case study we're going to talk about regarding Connie Navarro. Again, if you don't know who Dave Navarro is, he's the guitarist for Jane's Addiction. He was with Red Hot Chili Peppers for an album. He's a current host and judge on Ink Master, which is a reality show about tattoos. He's married to Carmen Electra. They had a reality show leading up to their wedding on MTV back, 2002 or something like that. I totally remember that. And he has a podcast. He actually has a live radio show they do on the internet, but then they put it into podcast form. It's called Dave Navarro's Dark Matter Radio Podcast. And they just kind of take all kinds of calls from listeners, and it's just kind of a cool call-in, anything goes topic show. So Dave put together a documentary called Morning Sun in 2015, and it's Mourning. And it was directed by his best friend, Todd Newman. And this is really his mom, Connie's story. I mean, it talks about Dave's process, and he is the person recounting a lot of the events, but it also interviews a lot of family and friends of Dave and his mother and his father, and tells the story of his mother's murder and subsequent capture of the perpetrator. And so we're going to talk about that now. So this documentary is a really beautiful tribute to Connie. Connie was born in the 1940s, raised in the 1950s, and then she meets Dave's father and they get married in the 60s. She's so beautiful. She's a model. She was on Let's Make a Deal. I think she was one of the models on the show. But she reminds me so much of Sharon Tate. You know, it's kind of the time.
Yeah.
And when she was she looks way more like Sharon Tate than Margot Robbie does. Yeah. Just with the hair, really soft features, gorgeous big eyes, and just a California girl. I mean, gorgeous.
It's kind of amazing, for one thing, the quality and the amount of material that they're able to use to really represent Connie. I mean, it's really well done. Their opening sequences, all these photos of her, and they've got like high resolution. I don't even know where they got the commercials. I mean, the commercials are
right. They look great.
Are 40 years old or
right.
more than 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing that they still had access to them, and you really get a sense of that. Certainly what she looked like, but then as you're hearing people describe how wonderful and kind she was, and non-reactive, and just a really, really kind person. You know, as you're listening to that and you're seeing these images of this beautiful young woman, you really get a real sense for who she was. Right.
Because weaved in there are a couple of like family home videos,
right.
And, you see her with children, you see her with Dave, and just... It does a beautiful job of looking at what her life was like through this footage, but also after she divorces Dave's father, and now we're into late 70s, just kind of her finding her own freedom and being a single mom, and even with some of her art and like some of the pictures she was doing and things like that, just kind of progressive for the time. And it's just, it was neat historically just to kind of follow that in imagery. But so she's divorced, and in the 1980s, she ends up meeting this guy named Dean, and she starts dating Dean, and there's even video footage of him over at her house. It looks like someone just set up the video camera. There's a ton of teenagers over just kind of hanging out, and everyone said, like, she's the mom that we all totally dug. She was super cool. We'd come over and go swimming at Dave's house, and she would make us food. And there's some video footage that's just sort of stationary in the kitchen of her chopping up food. The kids are being goofy, and then you see this guy saunter in, and he's got no shirt on. They're in their bathing suits, and he's muscular and fit, but very macho, very charismatic. But people described him, even in small interactions, of being just a little bit off and getting sort of a kind of a tough guy vibe from, especially some of the neighbors, even the younger guys that were just like Dave's teenage friends.
I think what I was particularly struck by in listening to those reports from the interviews and the second and third hand reporting of people. I mean, there are several people who were interviewed talking about sharing their perspective and sharing other people's perspectives on meeting him. What we're really talking about, regardless of what terms they use of, you know, his swagger versus his good looks and his physicality, is that their radar was telling all of them something was off.
Right.
You know, which I always want to go back to, that like everybody has that innate radar, and really you should be developing it. You should be honing it. Because when it comes now to come forward all these years later and be watching the story be recounted and sitting here with the information that we put together, to think, if somebody had known early on.
Right.
And in the same way, you know, Dirty John, when you go back to Dirty John, there's such parallels here.
There's a lot. But a lot of these people around her said, you know, she always found such like the good in people, and that's what she chose to look at. And but others were saying, there was just this edge to him that we didn't really like, you know, whether it was a look or kind of this dark shadow across his face from every once in a while. But they date for not that long, only about a 2.5-year relationship. From Dave's perspective, they end up breaking up, and there's not a lot of, you know, there's not one reason why necessarily. It's suspected that maybe she found out about some past criminal behavior, but she finally breaks up with him for good, if you will, and does so in a sense where it seems very fearful. She's changing locks at the house. She is cognizant of the fact that he's sort of surveilling or casing the place, to where she's having neighbors drive her somewhere, so she's not in her car. She's just kind of on high alert. And, you know, we were talking about earlier about walking on eggshells. You know, you can imagine not just her behavior, but now that's being portrayed to her 13, 14, 15-year-old son, that's seeing this change in mom, and what's going on. And we'll go, I want to get to sort of the breakup and some of those behaviors, and then we'll sort of jump back to some things that he was doing at the time. But there were people remember while they were in the relationship of occasionally her face would be swollen with bruises, that a restraining order was talked about. She was even going so far as to like making phone calls about seeking shelter at women's shelters at the time, and even thinking about moving out of town. So clearly she knows that something bad is going on, but she's trying to protect it and not tell a whole bunch of people about it or scare her child. But the day of her murder, it's March 3rd, 1983. So they were together about 2.5 years, and they were only broken up for a couple of months before she was murdered. So when we're talking about these behaviors that he's doing in between, I mean, it's happening in a short amount of time.
Right.
8 weeks.
Escalated very rapidly.
Right. So from her son's standpoint, you know, he's going to the day of her murder. He's in high school. He ends up getting picked up by his dad and then taken to his dad's home. And his dad said, you know, your mom hasn't been answering the phone. I'm going to go check on her. And so the father, the divorced husband of Connie, goes over about 7 or 8 o'clock at night and walks in and finds Connie as well as her best friend, which Dave knew as his aunt, Susan, both deceased in Connie's apartment. And her friend is in the bedroom, deceased, and then Connie is in a hallway, and like half of her body is shoved into a linen closet, a ground level linen closet with a towel or a pillow or something over her face. And so he immediately, goes outside and ends up calling police. Neighbors start coming out. And it's horrific and heartbreaking to everyone.
And Dave and I think a buddy of his, come up while, by the time he gets to the home, all the police are there.
Right.
The area's been taped off. He's got, one of the neighborhood moms is like yelling at him to get off the street, come here, come over here. You can only imagine what a young teenage boy, young teenager is feeling or not feeling. There's just this overwhelm,
right,
not knowing what's going on.
Well, and everyone knew right away that it was Dean. So
Exactly.
The idea was, oh shit, where's Dave? He's home alone over at the father's house. Dean knows where the father lives. Someone needs to go get him. And so that's why he was brought over from his, by his cousin or his uncle, away from the house, because Dean was now on the loose, on the run. So, but everyone knew. So some neighbors did describe that they had heard gunshots that evening, but they were both murdered with a firearm. So, but it was definitely no question about who was responsible. Sorry, all my notes are written down, so you're hearing lots of paper in this episode, I'm sure. So I think, for Dave, there was a lot of thought of, oh my God, I should have been there. Like, this was an unusual night that his dad actually picked him up because his mom had plans. So there was this survivor's guilt as well of like, he would have killed me too. He killed my aunt. I mean, he would have killed me if I were there.
Well, I think he also even reflects very wisely sort of having an adult spin on the situation and the potential for what could have happened. He comments during the documentary on that there would have been the possibility of, if he had been present, that he could have been a victim rather than his mom in order to hurt her more, because that ultimately was the goal of this awful killer, was to just inflict as much damage to this woman who dared reject him.
Right. Yeah, that was really interesting insight.
Yeah.
Coming all these years later. So he obviously talks a lot in this documentary about this sort of being the incident that catapulted his trajectory into a life of using drugs. I think he said even that night was probably one of the first times he had really used marijuana, just to zone out and take the edge off of everything that was going on in his grief and his loss.
He does say later in the documentary, I was well on my way into addiction. I mean, he almost says it sort of as a like a catch up of like, hey, I'm not blaming my history of substance abuse on this traumatic event. I was well on my way there, but then this was the doorway. And, hearing him say that, I just wanted to I really wanted to reach out to him and go, it doesn't matter. I mean, because trauma is trauma, and you don't have to make any excuses for whatever period you went through due to substances. It is a thing unto itself, but, it certainly didn't help the situation. But, I felt like he was kind of in that recovery mode of like, I have to take responsibility for my actions, which I really applaud. But at the same time, I would want for him not to feel like he has to diminish any aspect of this horrific event on his life.
And in the same breath, when, one of those conversations, he says, this shaped everything going forward into my adult life, whether it's, my drug use or my relationships and how I related to people and distrusting people, or, who he chose to let into his life. And I think that's, of course. That's going to reshape who you are to your very core of everything. Some of those things, he gravitated towards, maybe some darker things, or a lot of the ways in which we see men cope with trauma and depression that is just trying to feel good, and it's usually in behaviors and acting out rather than with women, and they have more traditional sort of depressive symptoms that we see. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not it is what it is, and they both happened at the same time, but there's no he was a victim in this just as much as everyone else, and
Absolutely.
There's no changing,
Absolutely.
and there's no fault of anyone for how you're coping. I mean, he had a wonderful support system around him. I mean, you also throw in the element that he was just about, to sign record deals and a rising rock star, and at a very young age going to be whisked off into this world of playing world tours. And then maybe, you're ripped away from your social support system at that point. So there's so many factors that lead into this. We talked about, like, in that 2 months that Connie had been broken up from Dean, that, yes, he would watch her and see when she was coming, when she was going. He would also just show up at restaurants when she was out with friends.
And glare across the restaurant.
Yeah, completely glaring at her. Would just know her plans and where she was going to be all the time. And there was also an incident where she was having a meeting with an entertainment executive, and they were at a restaurant, and at the end of the night they shook hands, and the man gave her a kiss on the cheek and said goodnight. And then at the hotel room that night, that individual, that executive, he got a phone call from what was likely Dean. I mean, he didn't identify himself, but he had the same New York or New Jersey accent, and basically told him to stay away from his girlfriend, and proceeded to know what flight that guy was getting on the next day, what his home address in Connecticut was, asked, hey, how would you like it if I went and visited your wife? If you ever go near my girlfriend again, I'm going to break her knees.
Which is like, how interesting is that he doesn't threaten violence against the guy.
Right.
Specifically, he threatens against both of the women that he assumes are in his life, his wife and Connie, who is not. There is no relationship between them other than this. But like, stop this. I'm going to go hurt her.
I had to read that over again because I thought it was saying he was going to break his knees, and it was her. So yeah, it was just completely terrorizing her. Do you want to talk about the incident when he breaks into the home when Dave is there? Just quickly touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a harrowing story in itself where Dave recounts. I think he was probably close to the end, so maybe like 13 years old, maybe 13.
No, they were already broken up, so he was 15.
Okay, so he's 15. He's home watching television, and he hears a lot of noise. And then I guess it stops. So he gets up and he goes to a different floor of the condo. Might have been his mom's bedroom. I believe it's his mom's bedroom. He goes in and he sees that the screen, not the screen, but the entire glass window
door
has been removed, which would make a hell of a lot of noise.
Right.
So immediately he's calculating. He knows exactly who he is. He knows it's Dean. He knows something's going on. And the way he addresses it is that he leaves that room, goes back to the floor.
Goes into a bathroom.
Right. And then comes back out and is like, Mom, Dean, are you there? So he's realizing, even at this early age, he's got to protect himself.
Right.
So then Dean responds, oh, yeah, I'm here. They interact with each other. Dean is going, oh, wow, I'm glad you're here. Something was going on. There was a loud noise. I don't know what it is. And Dean responds, well,
Dave responds.
Dave, sorry. No, Dean responds.
Oh, okay.
Dean goes, well, let's go see. So they're walking around the condo, and Dave recounts, like, I was lying because I knew it was him. He knew I was lying. He knew that I knew what he was doing. I mean, it was just like, it's chilling.
So chilling.
To hear like a 15-year-old having to deal with this. And then it ends up it then moves into a horrific incident where
He shows him there's a gun.
He takes out handcuffs. He handcuffs him to the toilet.
Right.
I mean, it's just brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal experience.
Awful. And
he comes away unharmed. I mean, physically, which is good.
Right.
But
right.
It goes to show you, kind of circling back around to those ideas of coercive control. Now he's trying to do the same thing to Dave that he was to Connie.
Right.
Those elements of degradation and gaslighting and, intimidation and, sort of trying to corral a person's experience into a very narrow purview.
Sure. So I want to read a written note that Connie wrote. And this comes from a court document that I'll link in our show notes. But this was addressed to Dean, and it was dated February 19th. And I think gives a really good idea as to just her mindset and what she was living with, and really echoes everything that we've talked about so far today. And these are in her words, quote, "I'm so sorry that you're still so angry and you feel a need for vengeance and punishment. You're accomplishing your goal. I feel like a walking dead person going through the motion of life, like a small wild animal who knows it's surrounded by a pack of wolves. The smallest sound or movement makes me jump. The sound of the phone is now frightening. Another hang-up. I'm so locked up in my own house, afraid of every sound the walls have probably always made. I walk out of my house, a coffee shop, a gym, looking. Terror. Until I get into my car and know that the doors are locked and I can breathe again until I get out. Then it starts all over again. How long is it going to go on?" End quote. So,
well, it's also beautifully written.
It is.
That even gives you more of an idea of what she's about.
Right. Well, true. So Dean, whose real name is John Alexander Dean Riccardi, he goes on the loose for 8 years. He is in the wind.
Yeah.
Out there. Eventually, the FBI ends up working this case as an FBI's most wanted. So the documentary does interview the case agent, and he kind of goes through, I think about 1987 is when they really start taking it over and trying some new tactics, which I thought were really creative. And this guy did his due diligence, that's for sure. So he goes on America's Most Wanted. They do a story on the TV show America's Most Wanted with John Walsh. And John Walsh sits down with Dave Navarro in this documentary as well. But so they're sort of simultaneously running that episode, and then they start thinking about the characteristics of this guy, Dean. And they're going, okay, vain, charismatic, cares about his looks, always has. Why don't we reach out to some plastic surgeons and see maybe he's changed the way he looks, because he has been totally off the radar for 8 years. So the FBI ends up sending a flyer basically with various images of him to every plastic surgeon in the nation. And sure enough, they get a doctor in Houston that says, I think I've treated this guy. And sure enough, 1999, he is arrested in Houston. And talk about like hitting the nail on the head about vain. When they arrest him, in his suitcase is a copy of the America's Most Wanted episode that he was on. He's carrying it around with him. It's unbelievable. This guy was a piece of work. I mean... Yeah. In the same,
and continues to present as a piece of work all through the trial and the things he says. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So at trial, I mean, he's older now. During this trial, he's pretending that he's hard of hearing. He's totally putting on this show for the jury, acting confused, like he doesn't know what's going on. Super over the top. He's not a very good actor.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is the attorneys that they speak to really made a great observation that it's not only about him not being a good actor, it's about he's so narcissistic that he doesn't understand his audience. So he's immaculately groomed. Mm-hmm. but he's pretending that he's deaf, which it's like, and pretending that he's confused, and that actually works against him. Like the jury immediately hated him. Well, no, I won't say hated. I don't know if they hated him, but they clearly, they turned on him is the term that was used. Everybody turned on him, which is great. I'm glad they did. I'm glad. I mean, we would call that, in threat assessment, in violence and threat assessment, we look at that as leakage. So it's the idea that you literally are leaking information and leaking behavioral traits because you can't contain them for whatever reason. Either you want to tell on yourself or you have characterological disturbances, in this case, his extreme vanity, that make him basically tell on himself.
Yeah.
If he had had any insight, he would have gone, I should play this a different way rather than a doddering old man.
Yeah, it wasn't very sophisticated.
I want to know what surgery he got. I was like, he got surgery. I want to see what was like before and after, and they didn't elaborate on that, which I completely get. But that's
that's what you're curious about.
That's like, what did he get done?
But yeah, the court. I think he testified on his own behalf because he was up on the witness stand. And then his mother testified against him. So
that blew my shit away.
Too.
Like I was watching it, and I'm the world's worst at like multitasking because of my ADHD. So I'll be like, okay, I'm reading an article on Dave Navarro, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at this while I'm listening. And I did like when I heard that, I went, "What?"
Yeah.
And paused it and replayed it several times. And man, you could tell that mom had been put through the ringer with him.
Oh my God.
Clearly.
And it seems like she's done a lot of work and had just amazing boundaries and was like, yeah, this is basically what my son is. Because essentially right after he murdered them, he called his father and said, I murdered these 2 girls in California. And then the dad hangs up the phone and she's like, oh, who was that, dear? What did he say? Oh, that was Dean. He said he murdered 2 women in California.
So, I mean, that's not necessarily leakage. That's basically a tsunami.
Oh, my God.
I mean, I would be interested, like, on one hand, this person is so reprehensible, who wants to talk to him? But, this is sort of, and I'm sure kind of leads into what you're about to talk about Dave going and attempting to talk with him to get some of the, like, understand the motivation. That particular admonition to his parents, I really, like, that makes me very curious. What was that about?
I don't know.
I don't think we're going to know.
I don't know. The thing that comes to mind for me is like if he needed money and someone to hide him, like maybe dad will be in my corner sort of thing. And even the mom even said, he said this, but then there was this caveat of like, oh, these women deserved it. Like he was even trying to explain away to his dad of, they found out about my criminal record and they both freaked out. And so like, what was I supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, clearly, another example of a lack of insight into how he's viewed. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the prosecution did a fantastic job. I think they really brought out in court. It seemed to really illuminate Dean's just intolerance for rejection, which I think is a theme for all of these types of cases we're talking about. This, again, going back to like, she's finally had so much of my shit that she's breaking it off with me. But that's inconceivable. Like how I've worked so hard. There's no way. Like she can't have control at this point. So it took about 8 hours for the jury to come back with a guilty plea. And he got the death penalty. However, that got overturned in 2014, I believe. And because there's actually some case law that came out of this. So I guess when they were picking jurors, it had to do with one of the jurors and their views on the death penalty and being making some inconsistent statements. So they wrote down, sometimes when you're part of a jury pool, you'll fill out surveys. And so they sort of wrote one thing, but then said a different thing, and were dismissed because of that. Okay. Well, his attorney essentially just did a bunch of hard work and digging and got his death sentence overturned because of this one juror that was dismissed based on these conflicting statements. So he has life. And in the documentary, he is at San Quentin. And it's sort of, the whole documentary is leading up to Dave going to go visit him face to face. And doesn't really know, what he's going to say and why he's there. But Dean does sit with him for a little bit, and they talk, and he doesn't say a whole lot about what the conversation was like. He's very fresh and sort of processing all of it right afterwards. But yeah, he comes face to face with his mom's killer, and Dean's it sounds like he hasn't changed a bit. He kind of comes in, sees Dave in the waiting room, and is like, "Oh, well, I didn't authorize for you to be here." And Dave's like, "All right, you can stay or you don't have to." And he goes, "I got a few minutes."
And by the way, having worked in California Department of Corrections, that's bullshit.
Right.
Because
you can't just pop up.
You can't just pop in. There's a whole list. There has to be communication. Inmates have rights as well. And right. So that was a lie.
You can't just surprise them with guests.
That was a lie.
Yeah. He was trying to control the situation.
Right.
So,
and that was a statement that was meant to throw Dave off, and it sounds like he handled it really well.
Yeah, exactly.
I love how we're just calling him Dave. Like we're just,
I know.
We're just buds.
Mr. Navarro.
I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole that we probably could do a whole other episode on, but this is such an extraordinary circumstance, and it's so specific of what does happen to children when their parents are victims of violent crimes.
That's very specific.
It is specific.
We've talked so much about trauma, even
Absolutely.
In teens and kids before.
But it's what's interesting is that having looked that up is there is a lot of research on it. There's a lot of research going all the way back to the 80s. Yeah. That psychiatrists and psychologists have actually been looking at this phenomenon, and it's not necessarily anything that is completely unexpected, but it just reinforces just removing a sense of all sense of groundedness from children that are probably just now coming into a period of understanding where they are in the world and where they are in their family dynamic. And the idea that this was ripped away from this young man is just tragic. And, he talks about immediately starting to use and self-medicate. And, a lot of art is born of pain.
Sure.
And it sounds like he numbed himself out for a good long time and is now sort of, maybe even this documentary is a way to sort of exorcise these demons and,
I think so.
And process a lot of that. But it was very interesting to look at. It's all in line with basically PTSD. What they experience. And here's something that came up that blew my mind. That was so specific about the research, and these will all be in our show notes, but the research showed that in 2000, in Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry, the study showed that about 1 of every 5 children who have lost a parent will develop some form of psychiatric disorder. And when we say that, there's a wide spectrum of psychiatric disorders, including various forms of depression that can be transient or long-term, or anxiety.
Or substance abuse disorder.
Exactly. So one of the quotes is, having the loss of a parent disrupts our foundation, our sense of security and safety, having secure attachment, having this parent provide everything that our parents provide for us. This all gets blown to pieces when we lose a parent. And, you can imagine, having heard that statement or read that statement and going back to how Connie was described as being sort of the cool neighborhood mom that everybody could come to. And I'm not going to repeat the content of it because I want everybody to go watch this on YouTube. It's actually really good. But, and I say this with great love and compassion, Dave, but you were being a little bit of a dick to your mom, which was completely age appropriate in development terms, right?
Right.
To tease her the way he was teasing her.
Yeah.
I mean, it was edgy. I mean, he was an edgy kid, obviously.
Yeah.
But she
handled it her own,
like really beautifully. Just sort of, she seems like she was she was Wonder Woman, kind of deflecting the bullets with her bracelet. She's kind of amazing. I mean, there's a lot of research on this that's very, very interesting about how, younger children, certainly, that don't have sometimes younger children will have an advantage because they don't understand the totality of death. And therefore, as it comes to them, it's more of an organic experience as opposed to someone like him at 15 to have the rug completely yanked out from under him. And then, even as a young man in his 20s, 8 years later, when they catch Dean and he has to go through this and relive all that.
Right.
I mean, it's incredibly traumatic, and it's clear from watching the documentary that he's done great work on himself.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done a lot of processing. Now, the most interesting point that jumped out at me, there's a lot that I won't go into, but one of the most amazing things, and it's not justifying or minimizing by any means, but it talks about how specific is this? Children whose parents, who experience parents' violent death, have a tendency towards perfectionism and end up usually being more successful.
Wow.
Like they're outliers in success.
Interesting.
And isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a generalization. I think it's a very specific view in a study, and studies can be skewed, but that was a number that I found very interesting. But you can kind of understand it. Like if all of your drive, all of that loss, all of that pain goes into,
oh my God, yeah.
This is going to be my coping. My coping is going to be my music, my art, my academic pursuits, my athletic pursuits.
I mean, he's one of the greatest guitar players
ever
of modern times ever. Yeah. And there's so many other pursuits. I mean, he's doing wonderful work. I highly recommend you guys to look up the organization Above Ground. It's awareness for treatment and mental health issues. They recently did a benefit concert here in LA a few weeks back. With his art, he does a lot of donating to art auctions for, like, there's an organization called Linda's Voice. It's for domestic violence prevention and awareness, and just an advocate for people who have undergone trauma, and especially, obviously, his heart lies with those that are child victims of that. So if you want to look at his art, his Instagram is Life After Death Street, and look up #TraumaKids. He's done actually some really cool stuff with imagery of Black Dahlia, and then he did, which is like my favorite that I showed you.
Yeah, it's
with
awesome.
Amanda Knox, the patron saint of injustice. He's done some really cool street art with her image. That's a really
amazing graphic.
We'll repost it, but it's pretty awesome. And a couple months ago, he was so nice, he sent us packs of stickers of some of these images. So that's Connie and Dave Navarro's story.
I wanted to build on what you were saying, though, about him being an advocate. And,
sure.
He's part of a movement that I think is very important, that we should all be aware of men coming forward and making these statements, because and men in high positions. It's so important for someone in a position of power. I mean, I don't think that it's everyone's responsibility. There are some artists who say, "Look, my only job is to perform. That's it. That I don't owe anybody anything except my performance." And I get that. I respect that. I mean, I hear where they're coming from. But when I see people like him who will get up and definitively state that this is wrong and this is a template for a relationship that is not working. I mean, I think of other people like Terry Crews. Terry Crews, his situation is different from Dave's in that he pretty much implies, I don't know necessarily if he implies that there was violence in his previous relationships, but he certainly implies that he had a different template for a relationship that was unhealthy, and he had to come to a different place. And the guy clearly has come a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, when you hear him speak on it, it's amazing. And those are just two. There are plenty of them out there.
And for them to be men in power in the entertainment industry.
Right. In this day of, Harvey Weinstein pulling his crap.
Right.
That's even diminutive to call it crap. It was so chronic and awful. I will say this. Who's the other one? Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart is a huge advocate because he witnessed domestic violence perpetrated on his mother. So he's been really huge. Daniel Craig is huge.
Oh, okay.
And there's some really great articles. I find myself in a position where I did a lot of research because I wanted to see, what people were standing up. And it's interesting because Terry Crews is a great example of somebody that comes forward with this idea of, hey, I was in a different place and I challenged myself to come forward. And there are some other people that are taking the stance that they're doing it to cover their past behaviors rather than admit where they are. I won't name any names, but they're pretty... Because
everyone's on the oh shit wagon of
right. I think there are some people that are trying to get so if you're going to do that, okay, that's great, but be upfront with who you were before.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Good.
Dave sounds like he's going to be a leader for this, and he continues to be. This is not something that I think he's going to drop anytime soon, which I think is wonderful.
Not at all. So I was telling you last week that we recently dropped off the top 100 true crime podcasts.
What?
In the United States.
Wait, it was top 200, right?
200. Oh, did I say 100?
I wish we were in the top 100.
So did you want to do some vocal groveling right now?
I'm going to grovel. Yeah, you know what? I like groveling.
Doesn't faze you.
Really good because I'm Southern, so we know how to kiss ass. So you guys, like we said, we're at our 2-year mark. We've made some amazing accomplishments over the last couple of years.
What was that?
It's easy for you to say.
We're in a really hot closet right now. Trying to finish up here.
But we've covered a lot of ground. We've gotten a lot of great feedback. We're doing some really fun things. And in this industry, it is still about numbers. So please, if you would go and give us a review on iTunes, that would be really helpful.
We would love to just hear your feedback on the show. And we have so many people that reach out on social media and emails, and we get emails all the time that we're like, pen pals with people by now. We're writing back and forth so often. But if any of you want to take some of your feedback and throw that in a review on Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating, those are the things that matter to getting us back up in the ratings. And we had really great momentum over the summer, and we want to just continue that out through the end of the year. And I think it will with some of our live events and getting exposure in other ways. But we would be very appreciative if you would. You can also find us on our social media. So our Instagram is at LA Not So Podcast, and Twitter is at LA Not So Pod, and then Facebook.com/LA Not So Confidential.
And we have an event coming up. You want to tell about that?
Yeah, so we have our true crime event coming up October 30th, and that is going to be co-presented by us and Rebecca Sebastian of the Dialogue Podcast and Yellow Tape True Crime Trivia. So we are going to be doing some true crime trivia at this live event, and then she's going to interview us for Dialogue, and then we're going to have some more true crime trivia. So it is free. It is at the Friend Bar in Silver Lake here in Los Angeles, and it is going to be so much fun. It's kind of a true crime weekend. On Friday night, the 18th, Murderish Podcast is having a meetup, and there's going to be a ton of local podcasters there from the true crime realm, so we will be there. So
if you're local, please come. Please say hi.
Yes, please. So that's in a couple weeks, and we will be back with a really fun Halloween-themed episode towards the end of the month. We're working on that now. And we'll we'll see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.
Do you love true crime, history, and mysterious happenings? Every week on The Cult of Domesticity, a guest and I discuss a different historical happening, a true crime story, or whatever strikes our fancy. Join me, Courtney, every Thursday to hear some fascinating tales from some fascinating people, wherever you listen to podcasts.